So my name is Ethos, and my pronouns are they, them. And if I were to communicate how I identify or experience the world, it would be as a trans masculine, non binary human being. Um, and my story is that I was born to a Filipino immigrant father and a white Southern woman who were both converted into Mormonism. So I was born and raised in the Church of Latter-day Saints. But ever since I can remember having an individuation of consciousness, I always felt comfortable expressing myself in a what modernity or colonized white supremacy social norms would call masculine or masculinity. And for example, Mormons moms make dresses and sew and stuff, and my mom had this green 90s dress with the sleeves, and and when and I had a bowl cut, and in this photo, maybe I can find it and I'll share it here. I look so mad, and anytime I have like anything like a dress or a girl piece of clothing, I was pissed. And like when I somatically reflect on it, like I would feel like my insides were crawling when I am perceived in this really feminine way, or I perceive myself. Maybe it's both. Maybe it's a relationship, right? And I would fight my mom to wear like khakis and boots and like, the Power Ranger button up, and my first crush ever was the pink Power Ranger. Like I just have always been this way, and that's just how it is. And, growing up in the 90s as this trans mass person with no words really for it, um, experiencing the world as a dyke lesbian, was interesting because in order to protect myself from being bullied, I also embodied and like performed toxic masculinity. And not only that, I was chronically depressed, I was highly suicidal. And I didn't even think I was going to make it to 18, but here we were at 18, and I was supposed to get recruited to play soccer, but I tore my shoulder as a goalkeeper. And I thought those dreams were out the window, but I did end up playing D3 ball and going to a school that absolutely transformed my life. And, but yet, I didn't have a plan after college. It's like the whole point of college was to party and to play soccer. Like, what came after that? I was surprised I was even alive for that long to get recruited to play soccer in a collegiate level and go to college. So I thought of a plan and I enlisted in the military. At the time, I was undiagnosed, probably with several neurodivergencies and with severe mental health. So structure felt good and safe. So while I was in college, which was like liberating my mind and educating my ignorance in really crucial ways, because I went to a school founded on a Buddhist pedagogy called Soka pedagogy, value created pedagogy, and classroom sizes were small. The campus was small. Everything was dialogue based. Everywhere we go, whether we were at a party, getting sloshed, we were talking about philosophy. We were talking about these ideas and what we were reading and what we were experiencing in politics, and it was like constantly this incredible learning container that was created. And it changed me from thinking I was stupid because my seventh grade math teacher told me I was stupid and I believed them. And I thought also rote learning in high school was stupid, because it is. Wasn't learning anything. It was just like, how do I take a fucking test, And this school deprograms you by teaching you philosophy and humanities and liberal arts at the core of it, and you read everything from everywhere from anyone. I would say less. We don't read, not like, the far right too much. I don't believe, like, it was pretty radical decolonial texts, and getting to the root of the history, and like actual truth telling of history, that like you're like, um, anyways, that school absolutely reminded me that I'm an academic, and not only that I'm intelligent, and not only that I can participate in these dialogues and these conversations, and not only that I want to. So I needed to read. So I started reading. They got me. They got me. And yeah, that school changed my life, and ever since then I've been trying to recapitulate and recreate that experience in the outside world. And it's constantly, whenever you are just curious about someone's opinion online, and you learn on social media quickly that someone will immediately like just start calling you names, and it'll turn into this whole, you're like, dude, I was like, you're like coming from genuine curiosity, because like you don't know, or you want to learn, or sometimes you want to fight. That's not a lie. But but people just get rabid. And what I realized when I got diagnosed with CPTSD, and my experience of even me getting wrapped up in that chaotic whirlwind, was our nervous systems play such a huge part, because nothing has worked better with complex PTSD than somatic therapeutic work, and doing somatic, having somatic tools, and engaging in the world in a somatic way. Because like, I believe when you have complex PTSD, you have really disorganized experiences, and even fractures of self, that like anything that gets you back into your body, into you, into like being one again, is always beneficial to like being able to cope with having complex PTSD, because it's not something that you can heal, because the only way to heal it is to change, to eliminate the problem. And the problem is our cosmology of separability that creates the current paradigm of social experience and self, which is our reality, which is not. And 10 out of 10 don't recommend. But that brings me to now, I guess. There's like a lot more that brings me to this, a lot of medicine work, a lot of ceremony, a lot of psychedelics, and art, and trouble, and people who aren't going to like me along the way, and don't like me along the way, and people, and where this, and then there's people who aren't even going to resonate with it. That's fine. What I'm doing is sharing a story. And that story's not gonna, it's not inclusive of everybody. It's inclusive of a certain frequency of people and experiences, and perception of life, and that's okay. But what's unnecessary is disregarding someone's work in any way, shape, or form to cause harm or violence. And as an invitation to check in with self, and like your integrity and your values, like what are you preaching to the world, and how are you actually living and walking that. And here we're going to do our best to do that, and hold ourselves accountable, hopefully ourselves accountable, but within our village we have real conversations, and like take boundaries and needs as like as gratitude, so you know where to meet people where they're at. And so this leads me to this thing that I created. Let's see if I can do this. Um, Sweet, I can. Look at that. So what I created, it was after a conversation with a friend about a relationship, and also me spending a year reflecting on my relationships, and really wanting to do deep relational work, because doing living this life in the collapse of empire is not meant to be done alone. And sometimes you have to do excavation of self to really welcome the people who you want to survive empire with, for real though. So I've seen many maps and diagrams and stuff like this, and I'm highly inspired by Vanessa Machado de Oliveira's work, Hospicing Modernity. Currently in the process of reading her newer release from August called Outgrowing Modernity. And so we use a lot of vocabulary from her and from these books because it names it so well. Something that I like to argue is against the Cartesian philosophical perspective that mind is superior, or like our only thinking center is the brain. And I actually like to challenge that a little bit further and be like, consciousness is relational, and it's the way that we experience awareness and expanded awareness, right? But then also intelligence, what really intelligence is, because all of our organ systems and our fascia and our joints, everything is intelligent. It's communicating something to us, right? And to be well means to be intelligent is to have clear pathways where you have clarity around your intuition, and whether, to be honest, in this world we're all somewhat traumatized, whether it's a trauma response that is going to be a reaction that's going to cause what I call a conflict cycle, or a repair cycle, and that all depends on a response or a reaction. And that really depends on how our somatic work has developed. Wish Legino is here. I'm not going to explain her work, but it's pretty cool. But essentially, we do need to understand like how we project and relate to different components and different dimensions within our own world, from like ourself, which is this intrapersonal, and then with or one or other, the interpersonal, and then communal within group, within village, then societal as a larger institution and system, and what I would say is like cosmology and culture. And then existential, that's with our relationship with our ancestors, with spirit, with something bigger than us, and whatever we feel comfortable in naming that as. For me, what I'm really trying to do is take away the morality of good or bad, or and this stuff from this work and decolonization and the level of conversation that we're having. Because when we attach morality to it, we then get like our defenses of like, I'm a good person, and like all this projection of morality that's just unnecessary. Like, because at the end of the day, we're all human. How can we all learn to just be in right relation with one another and with other beings and the world and the earth itself, right? So separability is really just like our disconnect from nature. And it's funny, like when I first sat with grandmother and then got home in 2017, I just went down the new age sucks you in when you're in that space. But like I do appreciate, and I watch Spirit Science on YouTube, but I did appreciate something that, and like I like to shift the narrative, but it is like a cutting off of your soul when you try to separate yourself from nature and from like being a part of the ecosystem in the way that cosmological seed of separability does from before we're even born, right? and and something that I do go into that I've been exploring is this next image. I do realize I gotta actually download the updated version, because like this is like ongoing process. Like this isn't something that like I feel complete ownership with. I feel passionate about it because it's helping me understand my world and experience, and really giving opportunity to bring new language. So as someone who's chronically poor, right now due to state suppression, but that's besides the point. For me, I don't really examine the world from economics or capital. And not only that, like I got really bored of reading white cis hetero men from Europe where like the system is so around capital and still object, like what Vanessa would call like self and object, like they're like everything, it's just like othering constantly. And so say like we live in this world where like housing is like you're guaranteed, bro. You got an acre. We're gonna be a village, help you build the house, rematriate the land. There's like an actual free market where like it's equitable in some way. You know, I call it mycelial economics, and so that's also an ongoing conversation and exploration. If all of that is met, what are the four core needs of being alive? And something that I feel I've concluded is like what I say, not concluded, but like curious around is desirability, belonging, wholeness, and worthiness, right? And so, if this wound of separability, and this is the cosmological seed that is planted in us in our consciousness while we're gestating in our mothers or our birthing bodies womb, then what it does is that it breaks it causes four core wounds that is pretty, I don't know. This could be different for everybody. I guess this is my exploration of this map, and I'd actually be curious, like, how others would fill this in for themselves. These four core wounds of shame, deficiency, deprivation, and abandonment from our four needs not being met through this cosmology of separability. Through there, we project and create societal institutions and systems where I think, I like it is neat, it is even, and there's a lot of subtopics and categories underneath all of these things, and there's even an exploration of like what is human existence, like power and body, like the sex body, like, this can go a lot deeper, but on a foundational level, we can all agree that these are projections which become like really algorithmic recapitulations of societal norms in order to create obedience and obedience to empire, to the societal norms of empire that follow a supreme order, and from there, though, I think that we see, and I think this is something a lot of people have been talking about, and then from there, I think this is really where neurocolonization comes in, because through these societal norms, I think is a lie that the individual can somehow not be affected by the world around them, especially like when you look at the world as like very energetic, and like our nervous, like electricity exists for a reason, and like our nervous systems are electricity, like our heart requires electricity in the exchange of potassium, sodium, calcium in order to pump. So we have energy and electricity within ourselves, so how can we deny that, like, we experience the world energetically? So of course, like, our nervous systems are receiving energetic codes from these algorithms and societal norms of modernity that create our neurotransmitters to be like dysregulated or overproduced or underproduced, somewhere in that spectrum. um and for these things to look like these things, to look like addiction, attachment, hierarchy, terror, scarcity, and spiritual desolation. And this is like the operating system in a way that someone can talk all they want, but then like somatically and like and through their actions or through their smear campaigns, they're really recapitulating really violent harm that is what we call colonial harm or supremacist harm or dominance in some way, right? Which is recreating hierarchy, which maybe for them they're getting serotonin hits from that. And so that's how they're regulating serotonin. And they're not even consciously aware of it, right? And so this is like I said, this is obviously ongoing explorations and ongoing conversations. So like I really hope that like if there's any questions or anything that is coming up as like we're sharing this, is like you feel called to share. So then, you know, moving on to something that I think is really juicy here and really exciting is something called rupture. And we all, and it's constantly talked about, like, and I also think that there is a healthy amount of rupture in one's life that inspires post-traumatic growth. But then it is true that, like, trauma is too much too fast, all at one time, and that's when things become traumatic. And but there is still always opportunity to grow from those things, but it's not to negate or to diminish the trauma and the unnecessary trauma that modernity and the amount of it that it produces for all of us to experience, which makes it really, really hard to even get into a repair cycle, let alone a trust building cycle with self or with others. So yeah, as someone who experiences a lot of conflict in their life, with self and with others, everything that you read about transformative justice, restorative justice, everything like that, this is also inspiring it, along with like work on polyamory and couples therapy work, and like my personal experiences, relationship, and like what what does like secure attachment look like, but like at a foundational level. And it's like, it's just this, like, it's, there's a rupture, not good, not bad, a rupture happens, tension exists. And depending on our nervous system's response, our trauma, our historical trauma, our intergenerational trauma, our societal trauma, um and our personal trauma or experiences with this person, or how much safety is built in the container, how much it's very nuanced. Like, you can have a response where you like can pause and you're like, what's going on here, and you can take a minute. And then sometimes, like, it is actual trigger, or it activates for me a emotional flashback, and I try to depict the chaos whirlwind that feels like it's happening, and everything's happening really, really fast, and then you have a reaction, and then you have a conflict, or base off of that reaction. And nothing's good or bad here, once again. It's just, it is a conflict, and it's a repair. Or if you are able to slow down and find a response, and see, like, for me, everything is about energy conservation, right? So, like, does this feel nourishing for me? Does this feel healing? Do I have capacity to do emotional labor at this time, or do I not? Like, am I feeling regulated? What is, my capacity and my state of being's ability to have a wider window of tolerance, or is it narrower, and all of this is crucial questioning whenever a rupture happens. And so if we're lucky enough, and we're committed to processes of repair, we can get into what I call trust building cycles. But let's go over collapse. The scariest one, the one that we avoid, the one where we pathologize and call it everything under the sun, and throw people away when they have it. And it looks different for everyone. And essentially, like, conflict cycle is like, there's a break in the veil or in the illusion of whatever anchor or story or narrative that we have then identified with, right? And these whirlwind chaos arrows also can all of these, like, different parts can always lead into collapse. Like, it's porous. Like, it's kind of like, um the pathophysiology of shock, and like when your body's going into decompensated shock, or like septic shock, like your veins and get porous and leaky. And this is the same thing here when you're in a conflict cycle. it is meant to lead to collapse, and it's like this whirlwind of it. And sometimes you go through the full cycle. Your illusion that you anchored into an illusion that isn't a real anchor. Like for me, when I was in white supremacy or an MLM back in the day, and then I identified really hard with it. When that all shook and like was cracking, like the amount of shame and blame and guilt, and then anxious or avoidant could be like that attachment. Like for me, it's disorganized due to the amount of trauma that I have. And it all leads to collapse. And the thing is like completely remove morality from it. And from a spiritual perspective, it could be an initiation. But to be clear, abuse and these things are not a part of this cycle. This cycle is for when those who have been abused or violently harmed are this is their internal. I feel like it's their internal process. I don't believe abuse and violent acts from others is an initiation or rich like or anything like that. It's a hard lesson to learn as someone who has experienced DV. But I think I want to put that aside. Like what I'm saying here is like for me when I've been recovering from that domestic violence experience with my ex, I've had to re-anchor my self of identity and go through a repair cycle with myself, right? So you really contemplate and look at yourself and hold yourself accountable through where you anchored in ways that wasn't strong in self and was so easily collapsible through maybe codependency in a relationship or identifying with something where you attach and grip and restrict and constrict it, and then like you really build an understanding and even empathy through this experience, and through contemplation you really learn to accept oneself. And I think the self acceptance, like this, I actually originally wrote this as transformation, but transformation seems so much doing. And I think like to get away from this capitalist need of doing or self-development is like no, like actually radical acceptance is the transformation. So like acceptance is really this art of being still and listening and being active listening to self in ways that I think everyone does it differently, and I'm not here to judge how that happens. And then you integrate that, like you metabolize, you really chew on it, and so then you create this maturity and through building this repair, and then in a way you leap to this really epic trust building cycle, which is also really an accountability cycle, because trust, I believe, is through accountability and creating accountability. And accountability has been something I've been deeply interested in for a very long time as someone who's experienced a lot of harm and a lot of trauma, especially communal harm and trauma. And so, and this also applies with self. Like, you have to, like, when you have collapse, you also have to rebuild trust with yourself because, like, I know at some point for me, I'm like, can I trust my intuition? Like, how did we get here? Right. So then you have to acknowledge it. There's a part of taking ownership, but for someone with CPTSD, it's really important for us to be really clear about what is our burden and what isn't ours, and really being strong in those boundaries. It's like really having remorse, which is really tied to like processing and metabolizing grief and shame and these emotions and these emotions that modernity and this paradigm deem as low vibration or inferior or whatever bullshit. And then from there you create praxis, you create a lifestyle, it's a practice, and it's realizing that neurocolonization is not something that you just like, oh yeah, I sat in a ceremony with ayahuasca and now I'm done, I'm decolonized, or I get a lot of traction on social media, like I'm an expert. It's more like I have to do this work every single day, every single day there's some way that I am complicit to this paradigm continuing on. How do I be so gentle with myself and understanding, and also like have class consciousness around it, while also doing my best where I can be integral in the most in the highest forms of integrity. And then it's about talking about it, and talking about it with others, and realizing that I don't know nothing, and I'm so excited to hear how all this is landing with others. And then, Vanessa does in her books, she talks about wide and narrow boundaries and capacities. And I think that's where we expand, like the point of consciousness expansion and not being ignorant is to have expansion, not restriction. Like when I was in the white supremacy world, it was like very much like this exclusive club and party, and like very exclusive, and ugh, very white also, I was gonna say. And really it's like, how do we expand, and like how do we breathe with loving boundaries where we know what we have, and building a village in a way so we can really not continue down the path that we are. And then from this trust building cycle, we have neuro decolonization, which is taking like holistic practices as a way to decolonize and to like actually on a neurophysiological level, in my opinion, regulate our neurotransmitters to be at a homeostatic stasis, set regulation of homeostasis at a way where we can maintain like our nervous systems and be consensual to the emotions and the intensity in which we express the emotions without manipulation. And the polarity of modernity based off of Vanessa's work is relational. And I think that's why so many poly folks are attracted to this. And so yeah, like a lot of what I'm putting on this map in this diagram, I'm like, what is the polarity, not the opposite, but the polarity of what modernity births. So there's communal secure attachment, Logina will go into, still deciding on synarchy or heterarchy, as a polarity of the hierarchy, completion for addiction, abundance for scarcity, metabolic spirituality for algorithmic religion, and justice for terror, right? And from there, we could, hope that the metabolic projection of societal norms and agreements, under consent, and everyone's aware of this, not being manipulated into this, is rematriation, cultural literacy, decolonized polarity, mycelial economics, queerness, relational congruence, metabolic spirituality, and metabolic healthcare. And I'm so not attached to any of these words, but it's just an exploration, right? And I think what's really interesting though about this map overall, and I think something that just got brought up, is that we want to make a cartography though, because what I'm seeing this is like the big Hawkeye view of the work that Resma Menachem, Adrienne Marie Brown, Sonia Renee Taylor, Sata Shakur, Huey P. Newton, Franz Fanon, Paula Freire, Vanessa, like Stephanie Fu, and all the amazing guests that are going to be appearing on our workshop series, and our have been, and the indigenous people for who have been stewarding this knowledge for us to continue to receive it and to digest it in different ways that make sense for us, and for it to somatically land where it's like we are remembering our right relation place in the ecosystem of this planet and of this world, and yeah, I'm excited to share more and to dive in deeper, and because like this is only like one whole of the two whole of like the whole situation here, and um here we are. But yeah, I just felt called to share and record this. So that was a sneak peek into the alchemy of rupture, and I hope that it percolated some curiosity in your mind, and but yeah, that's my story. And some flow of what we're gonna cover coming up this Sunday, and I'm just like very excited to share this maturation of my previous writings and work and explorations that since college, really. And yeah, join us. Uh Sorry, my cat is disrupting everything. And we look forward to having you there, and subscribe, like, share, all the things.